Welcome back to Washington Watch. Joseph Backholm sitting in for Tony. Glad that you are with us. Last week, we started looking back over the past year and highlighting some of the good news and developments that we have witnessed. As we did so, it's been clear how God has been at work even in challenging times and challenging administrations. And one mountain that we've seen him move is one that FRC was very actively working on, and that is the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. Because the NDAA is considered must-pass legislation, the left tried to inject bad provisions into it. But FRC was there to put up a fight. And here to highlight the battle over NDAA and the victories that came out of it is FRC's Director of Federal Affairs for Family and Religious Liberty, Mary Beth Waddell. Mary Beth, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Great to be with you, Joseph.
Well, this is a great story, and I think people are going to be encouraged by this. But to start it off, remind people what the National Defense Authorization Act is.
So the NDAA, as we call it, like you said, is the National Defense Authorization Act. And it is essentially the piece of legislation that helps fund and authorize the different policies within our military and Department of Defense. It's where you're going to get military infrastructure, military health care, pay raises for the military. This year, there's authorizing funding to advance the development of various missile defense programs, systems, things of that nature, and also different support for our allies. And so it's sort of the all-encompassing package to make sure that our national security is secure.
Is it fair to think of it as the military budget?
Absolutely.
So why this year was there a priority placed on including language that would require women to register for the draft?
Well, as you were just speaking with the Congresswoman, this administration has an agenda. And that agenda is to blur the lines of gender. And that's what you saw in this. You know, this is sets out the policy parameters of the military and of the Defense Department. And so they started wanting to tinker with some of that policy and say, we're going to begin to not recognize the differences between men and women. We're going to say, you know, under this false equality claim that, we need to mandate that women register for the draft, even though they can perfectly well volunteer. They're a great asset to our military. FRC supports women serving. We just don't support them being mandated into combat. And that's really what was being required here under this false guise of equality for women.
And tell us a little bit more about that. Why do you think this was bad policy?
Well, number one, it's unnecessary. If you look at the numbers, you don't have to call up women before men. You would only, if we needed to more than double our military to about 5 million, you would only need about 1.5% more male population to join. And then it's also dangerous because, again, you're erasing the distinctions between men and women. And while there are women who can meet the high burden standards physically for combat, that percentage is much lower than in the male population. And specifically when you're dealing with a draft, there's no way to really account for that and ensure that only those top tier women are mandated into combat. And therefore, that then becomes detrimental to the lethality, readiness, and unit cohesion of our military. And if we need a draft, then we absolutely need the most lethal, most ready, and most cohesive military to be able to respond to whatever's occurred to require that.
There were many who said at the beginning of this, when the language is inserted, that it was essentially a foregone conclusion and that was just going to be the way it was going to be. Tell us the story of how this went from something that seemed inevitable to ultimately something that was stripped out at the last moment.
Absolutely. It was such a whirlwind ride of the last few months, going all the way back to the summer. You know, when the text was released, FRC, we looked at the language, began scrubbing it, seeing if there was any problematic language, and obviously we found some. And as we started alerting folks on the Hill and other outside organizations and even our constituency, letting them know what we found, there was a lot of pessimism over whether or not this was going to be able to come out. It's been a push since 2016 to make this happen. And everyone just thought, with the Democrats in control, that this is the year it's going to happen. It's a foregone conclusion. But we weren't willing to take that laying down. All of our, it was Congresswoman Hartzler was one of those real champions on the Hill that we were able to come alongside and let folks know that, no, this is something we want to fight. And then getting our listeners and our constituents involved. We had more than 200,000 messages sent to the Hill, letting Congress know that, the constituents back home, grassroots, don't support this. We rallied the outside groups, that we work with and coalitions, and just pushed, going all the way back to the summer to finally see this happen.
What was it that you think made the difference?
I really think it was the constituents. I think it was the listeners. The people, on the Hill, they're not going to get reelected if their constituents aren't happy with how they're voting and what they're allowing to pass. And so hearing from so many folks, I think really was part of the tipping point, and being able to have those allies on the Hill that we did, like Senator Inhofe, Senator Hawley, Senator Lee, who would be able to work the inside-outside game, and Congresswoman Hartzler as well. That was sort of the 1-2 punch.
Mary Beth Waddell, thank you so much for your time and your, I know, significant effort on this issue. We appreciate people who don't just take what other people say is inevitable for their word, and they go fight anyway, and very often really good things.